Welcome to At Work in America, sponsored by Paychex. At Work in America digs in behind the headlines and trends to the stories of real people making a difference in the world of work. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Bowes and Trish Steed.
Welcome to the At Work in America show. My name's Steve Bowes. I'm joined by Trish Steed. Trish, what is happening?
Not a whole lot today. It's midweek and I'm just trying to get through it. How about you?
Grinding. I'm well. We're grinding down the last week of unofficial summer. Next
That's right.
weekend coming up as we record this is Labor Day weekend, and got a great show coming up though. So I do want folks to take at least some of their time over the next couple of weeks and spend some time with our guest. We have Don Weinstein, who's longtime guest, friend of the show, digging deep into HR tech, innovation, advice for HR leaders, and plenty more. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, and you know what? He is so good that we're going to be bringing him back once a quarter to give some information about, companies to invest in, companies to be paying attention to. And so he's going to drop a few of those on this episode. And so have your pen and paper ready or your device ready to record some of these good tips he's going to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And he talks a little bit about voluntary benefits, oddly enough, right, towards the end of the show. And I do
Yeah.
want to say congratulations to our friends and show sponsor Paychex, Trish, who have won one of the top HR Products of the Year awards for the Paychex Flex
Yay.
Perks product, which is a voluntary
Good.
benefits platform that they've made available to their customers. And so you can learn more about that. But thanks to Paychex, of course, for sponsoring today's show. There's some great resources that Paychex always makes available to our listeners, Trish. And now you can go to paychex.com/AWIA to get access to a webinar from Beaumont Vance, who's Paychex Senior Vice President of Data Analytics and AI, a webinar to discover how leaders are using AI, right? This is the age of AI, as Don talks about in the
Yes.
show coming up, but to look how you could streamline HR tasks, supercharge productivity and efficiencies, automate tedious tasks, and plenty more. Paychex is embracing AI. But they're not just embracing AI, they're providing resources and tools to help you understand it and get the most out of it. So go to paychex.com/AWIA and check that out. And of course, congratulations and thanks again to our friends at Paychex.
Yes, and you know what? Can I just say they are always like 2 or 3 or 10 steps ahead of where everybody else is. Like they are so good, and then they share that knowledge. So, what perfect timing too is we're going into the big fall conference season for HR leaders to learn more about data and AI. This is on everybody's minds. So again, Paychex just gets it out there and is topical and before everyone else.
Yeah, so we're leaning into HR tech a little bit in these next few weeks and months. So hope you're enjoying that and along for the ride. Enjoy the show coming up with Don, and thanks for listening to the show today. Trish, we are excited today to welcome our guest, a repeat guest, a frequent guest, friend of the show. He is Don Weinstein. He is a strategic advisor, a venture investor, and a corporate board member. You might know him previously as ADP's Global Chief Product and Technology Officer, where he was responsible for all aspects of ADP's global technology strategy and delivery, where he successfully introduced numerous new products and industry firsts, including the hugely successful ADP mobile app, the ADP Marketplace, the ADP Data Cloud, among many others. Don, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Wow, thank you. With intros like that, you can just keep me coming back time and time
Well,
again.
it is quite a bio, but an impressive one as well. And we talked a little bit in the opening about how the top products of the year kind of thing just happened. And, I was involved in that for HR Tech again. And during your tenure at ADP, Don, it was year after year after year, ADP was winning that award for just innovation it must have been 5-6 times in a row. And I know you had a big team that helped you do all those things, but you certainly played a big role in that. So yeah, it's impressive. And you guys had a run there that was really phenomenal.
Thank you. Technically, it was 8 years in a row, but nobody's
Wow,
counting.
there you go.
I'll tell you what, the interesting thing was I didn't meet you, I don't think, until I probably near the end of being a practitioner, but in my entire career, it was all in St. Louis, and no matter where I worked, we had ADP. So I was actually benefiting from all of this hard work that you were doing over the years, you and the team, from a practitioner standpoint. So yeah, I can attest the things that we were using were great and always kept us ahead of things. So, and as you need to be like a co-host. Can we make him an honorary co-host at this point? I feel like he's,
might as well be. Yeah, Don's been on the
he
show
could just
probably.
step in anytime.
I think
It's like,
probably our most frequent guest over the years.
I
If
think
we
so,
if
yeah.
we counted them all up, I think probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
wow, it's like Shark Tank when they have guest hosts come in.
Oh
We'll
my
have
gosh,
to make
that's
that.
you. Yes, you're it. We deem you that right now.
There you
You're in
go.
your 10th show or something.
So folks who listen to the show might have caught Don along with a few other folks a few weeks ago when we were doing some 15th anniversary celebration shows, and we had Don on with a few other great folks like Cecile and Lisa Sterling. I'm forgetting some people. Mike Carden was on with us and a couple of other folks.
Megan Gretchen.
Gretchen and Meg Bear, right? Great. It was a really good show. It's in the archive on hrhappyhour.net. But during the show, I alluded to a story I was going to tell about some ADP stuff back in the day when Don was still there. But we just ran out of time for the story, and it didn't really make sense for that show. It's in my notes, Trish, to tell the story
All
on
right,
this
let's do
show
it.
because I mentioned it again, and I'll tell the story. I hope it's as funny as I remember it. It may be one of those stories that's only funny to me. And there's a little
Aw.
bit of kind of inside HR techie baseball going on too. So
Okay.
I'm guessing on the year, let's call it 2015, 2016 or so. It doesn't matter, but it was in that time frame. A new company popped into the HR tech landscape called Zenefits, and it might have been 2014, maybe. I don't know. It was a while back. So that was the company, and some people might remember them. They are still around in one form or another, I believe. But they had entered the HR tech market and made a lot of noise, right? They had some innovative new technology. They had a very aggressive business model. As it turns out, some questionable business practices we learned later on, but they were making waves in HR tech. And since we were doing the HR tech conference, of course, right, the biggest event of the year for HR technology, of course, I was interested in having them be a part of that at the time. They'd raised a ton of money too. I guess they might have been unicorn status at that point. And so their CEO and founder was a guy named Parker Conrad, who is still around in HR tech, by the way, and having a kind of a remarkable second act with a company called Rippling, but that's another story. But Parker was an interesting guy. There is a podcast, Trish. You weren't on it for whatever reason. I don't think you really particularly liked Parker.
I did not care for him. I pick up vibes, let me just tell you what. And I knew the second I met that man, I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Good instinct.
Not afraid to say it. So I wouldn't know. I didn't appear on the show.
So there is an HR happy hour back in the archive with me and Parker back from the Zenefits days, which was an interesting conversation. And after that, I said, hey, Parker, you should really come to HR Tech and participate, do a panel with me, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, and I don't remember the nuts and bolts of it, and it doesn't really matter anymore. ADP, the biggest really HR tech company there is, right, got involved in a lawsuit with Zenefits. And I can't remember now who sued whom, or maybe it was a double reverse lawsuit. Maybe both were suing each other. I don't know, but that was going on at the time, right? And so we were doing this panel at HR Tech in the middle of these lawsuits, and these panels they're just panels. They're not that big a deal. And I was going to moderate this panel, and it wasn't even like in the big room or anything. It was like a side room or something. And we get to the panel and people start coming into it. And it was like, a couple of vendors, maybe Workday was there, and I got Parker to do it, and maybe someone from Oracle. I don't even remember who else was there. And all of a sudden I see in the front row a couple of folks from ADP who I knew who worked for ADP, like big hitters. Don, I don't specifically remember if you were there or not, but it was.
I was there.
Okay, it was executive types. And the next thing
Yeah,
I know,
I remember.
I see Carlos in the audience. Carlos, who is the CEO of ADP, the most powerful CEO in HR tech, super wonderful person, by the way. I loved Carlos. He's retired now, and Godspeed to Carlos, a wonderful guy. But he was sitting right in front, like the second row, dead center, to listen to this. And basically, I felt like the whole ADP team was all lined up in the second row, staring daggers at like Parker, maybe me too. I don't even know.
They were, yes.
And I just thought it was hysterical because Carlos, look, he was such a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
But at an event like HR Tech, you know, you're not going to get 5 minutes with him. He's going to be with customers and investors and whatever he's doing, right? And for him to take an hour out of his day, along with most of the executive team or whoever was there, and Don included, to sit there and watch this, I thought was really funny. So that's the story. I thought it was hysterical. And I don't even remember a word of anything anybody said at the panel either, but I remember like the ADP team just laser focused on what was going on, you know, with Parker from Zenefit. So that was the story, and it was funny to me. So thank you for indulging me and retelling it.
It was fun. I remember I was there. I know
Okay.
exactly what you're talking about, but I think Trish nailed it though. She's got the people instincts there, and you know, Carlos is the most highest integrity individual I think I've ever met and certainly worked for in my life. And then you know, not everybody is holds themselves to that same standard, and that's all I want to say about that.
Yeah, and what's developed subsequent to all that is complicated and boring, probably too. The Rippling story is interesting now, and maybe someday, Trish, I'll coax you into talking to Parker again. But the that's the story. So
That's a hard no from Trish.
That's a hard no. No, you know what? I think I won't get into him personally. I would just say, like, kind of what we're going to be talking with Don about today when we're talking about investing in new companies and new technology. I think integrity needs to be front and center when you're talking with anyone, especially of a startup or something you're going to invest money in. And you do have to go a little bit on your gut. I didn't have a specific reason. I mean, I remember going to an analyst day and I was just like, hard stop. Nope. I didn't know why, you know what I mean? But sometimes you have to listen to those little inklings. And I know, Don, as we kind of talk through today's topics, I'm sure there's some of that goes on with you, right? Just from being a very experienced and seasoned executive, you do have to listen to that little voice in your head saying, not so sure about this one. Might be cool, but might not be the right thing right now, right?
100%. Very important. You want to know who you're getting into, you know, who you're getting into bed with, so to speak, for sure.
Yeah, because it does reflect on your own brand. And I think, and again, there can be very nice people in any industry, but they are also people who are not on brand with what you are trying to portray and hold yourself to that high standard. So yeah, that was all that was.
There you go.
All right. Well, enough of the trip down memory lane. Let's talk about what's happening now. Like, Don, we mentioned, of course, in your bio, you know, Chief Product Officer at ADP for a long time, lots of innovation. Now you're working with startups, you're investing, you're sort of still really got your hands in the space, but now you're getting to really stay like kind of pick and choose what you're interested in and what you want to do. I'd love to get your thoughts on just where innovation's happening right now in HR and in workplace tech. What's interesting to you? Maybe give us a couple of thoughts on where we're at right now in 2024.
Yeah, no, would love to, and thank you for the opportunity. I mean, clearly, right now, all the energy is in AI, artificial intelligence, and that includes a heavy focus of venture investment. And whenever you see that happening, that becomes kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because all that investment, well, first of all, it attracts investors, and all that venture investment attracts founders and attracts engineering talent. And it just becomes a critical mass in and of itself. And in a domain like human resources, I think some of the use cases look pretty promising. Certainly, there's been some early traction in areas like recruiting, using AI to help candidates match with potential openings, in learning to chart out learning development paths, even mundane stuff like help desk and case management. But at the same time, I think there are a few watch out areas to be mindful of. And it happens typically whenever a new technology gets introduced and everybody gets excited about the promise and the potential, but you miss out on, what are some of the spillover effects. And I'll just give you a couple of things that kind of I'm seeing right now. And for example, let me use an example from kind of my world on the technology and think about one of the hottest use case out there is AI driven programming, right? So
Mm.
people are using AI to generate code, and again, it looks really promising. There's lots of documented productivity benefits for it. Every single one of the startups I'm working with is doing it. But here's an interesting kind of side order effect. Like, what happens when there's a bug in the code that was generated by the AI?
Mm.
Who's going to debug that? Have you ever tried, Steve? I know in your prior world, have you ever tried to debug somebody else's code? Like,
Yeah, wait, a long time ago, awful. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's brutal. So
exactly.
who's going to debug the AI generated code? Another AI? Now you have one AI agent debugging the other AI agent's code. It becomes a little wonky out there. The second thing I would say is just, again, the dirty secret in our industry is the data, and I think HR data, especially talent data, is some of the least reliable data that there is out there for
Mm.
a variety of reasons. So one of the things I look at is both inside an organization, but also if I'm looking at potential technology vendors. Everybody likes to talk about their data science team. Talk to me about the data engineering team. How big is it? Are they who's cleansing the data? Who's organizing it? Who's managing it? When I was at ADP and we were building the data cloud, I want to say we had about 10 data engineers, maybe five at least, for every data scientist.
Wow.
And that's not a bad thing, right? Because five great data engineers can make a data scientist enormously valuable. But if you're just dropping a data scientist on top of a messy data set, the algorithms are only going to be as good as the underlying data they're running on. So, and then a third thing that it just, to me, it feels like we're still in the very early phases of this, and I could see it unfolding almost similar to, maybe I'll use the mobile revolution as an example, where mobile came out, it hit the scene, and what did everybody do? Step one, take your existing process and adapt it to mobile. But by their nature, these existing processes didn't grow up in the mobile era, so they didn't really take to them. Step two, we started to call it like mobile first, right? Which was more of like the hybrid or the halfway house. Well, let's start with a mobile framework, but then let's kind of go backwards and try and make it backwards compatible to a desktop interface. And often you'd end up with deprecated functionality. And
Mhm.
then finally in phase three, we're like, okay, let's stop doing that and let's just rethink the whole experience from the ground up. And so I see a lot of technology paradigms going through those phases, and I think we're starting down that path right now with leveraging generative AI inside of HR practices. But it's clear we're still in the early stages of phase one, and it'd be great if one of these days we could we do the same pattern every single time. If one of these days we could take a step back, accelerate our way through step one, skip step two, and let's just get straight to step three, and actually let's just really rethink things from the ground up. But for whatever reason, that never seems to happen.
Well, you know what? I'm glad. So, two things. First of all, thank you for pointing out about data engineering, because I'm sitting there thinking, like, if I have my HR hat on, or maybe I'm another C-suite leader who I'm not sure where my focus and my questions need to be, I think that was a very valuable one. So, absolutely take notes on that if you're listening. But secondly, I would say, Don, I think that even being back in, corporate world, for example, there's a lot of times where even the HR leader might be pushing for, certain process changes before you go through a big technology, purchase or deal. And it's often the other business leaders that are like, no, 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 I still want to see my report the way I've seen it the last 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So part of it has to be pushed on the C-suite leaders to say, look, we need to agree to do something different. We need to be open to it. And I think that's a little bit of where the disconnect is, because who's in charge of making people even open to process changes? Otherwise, you are still going to have that no matter whether it's AI or mobile or whatever. You have to be really careful, I think, when you're talking to a CFO or a CEO or COO and say, look, we're going to just take a leap of faith here. We're going to really change up the way we do things to have more productivity and effectiveness. But I don't know. The places I worked tended to be the opposite. And again, I was an ADP customer at many places, but um, it was frustrating to be in HR and thinking like, oh my gosh, we have all these great capabilities. We can't take advantage of them. What do you
Yeah.
tell, if you're an HR leader, someone listening now, what do you tell them? Like, how do you have that conversation with your fellow C-suite members to impress upon them the urgency and the need for process change as part of maybe new technology selection and implementation?
Yeah, no, you're right. Technology's changed, but people don't. And so we
Mhm.
see those same behavior patterns. The other common behavior, like what I would often do is the other behavior pattern you'll see is there's always the distribution of people between the kind of the early adopters, the
Mhm.
mainstreamers, and the laggards.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I used to do was let me find within the C-suite who's going to be my partner on this one, who's somebody who's excited about it. I would do that both internal as a consumer of technology and find who's my internal partner who's really going to be that lighthouse. I would do that on the external side too. It's like, we had a humongous sales force well known for it, but within that group there were a handful of people who were really just excited about the new technologies. And to me it was always, let me find that person who's going to be, more of the leading adopter who I can partner with. And then we use the term lighthouse project. Let's do that lighthouse deployment here, and then we can
Mm.
showcase it back to the rest of the organization as a way to spur it on. But human behavior wise, it's hard to imagine you're going to be able to get everybody to adopt right out of the gate and change their processes right away. So just find the path of least resistance, I would say, and try and focus there. And the internal proof point was going to be worth 10x, 100x, whatever external case studies you can bring in.
Yeah.
The other thing we
I
would
like
do,
knowing that. That's really good because I wouldn't have thought to maybe even ask the vendor you're going to partner with, right?
yeah,
Say, look, I've got a kind of a tough group here. I need your best person at really being optimistic about this and showing the value up front, right?
that's right,
Yeah.
that's right,
Interesting.
absolutely.
Good tip.
Don,
I
I
mean, we
think,
did.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, just one other thought. I mean, one of the other things that we did was it was always super effective. Was same thing going back to the vendor, and we would do site visits in particular, and ask them find me one of your current customers who looks like, roughly speaking, what we do, and is
Mhm.
willing to talk and host us. And there are a number of times where we took the
Oh,
entire
good.
executive team on the road and would spend a half a day or a day with one of the customers of the other company. Now, again, we were a big company. We had a lot of joint customers. We spent some money, so we were able to kind of throw our weight around a little bit like that. Sometimes that maybe doesn't work for everybody, but when you can, I think it's a wonderful way to get your executive team all seeing the same thing at the same
Mhm.
time, and out of their day-to-day context.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I remember, God, I'm not going to tell another long story, but God, I've got some great stories of site visits back in the day when I was part of a software selection team for a very, very big company I was working for. But it was so valuable going around, and we toured. We probably did 6 or 8 of them, right, over the course of a year, because we were about to make what ended up being like $100 million purchase or something like that, right? And so it was
Yeah.
definitely worth it. Don, I think so. Site visits and doing those deep dives into customer references is certainly one
Yep.
way that organizations can better evaluate technology. But maybe let's step back just a half step and sort of say, what are some advice you have for HR leaders or organizational leaders to try to assess technology a little bit more generally? Like, we're going to go to HR
Yep.
Tech in a few weeks, and lots of other events happen this fall, and there's this wave of AI solutions and other innovations coming in the market. The market's very vibrant still, lots of money coming in, as you suggested, Don. For HR leaders, I feel like we've been talking about this for 15 years, but it's still probably true. Like, what are some tips or guidelines to help them better assess this market and understand where to even devote some of their attention first and then potentially their resources next?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's challenging right now with so much coming at you. And I know in my old role, I was a big buyer of technology, so I can empathize. Just getting pounded by various offers and value props out there. And
Yeah.
look, a few things I would recommend. The first one is when you're looking at solutions in general, but especially AI solutions, definitely include your CIO and your CISO early in the process. I know that sounds a little self-serving coming from where I'm coming from, but they can be real assets in helping you to understand the underlying technology, cut through some of the vendor jargon. And again, if it is an AI-based solution, you want someone who can really probe the quality of the underlying data, the algorithms, the quality of the engineers who are building the solution sets, and not just get caught up in the slickness of the UI itself. Is
Mhm.
definitely something I would do. If you are getting a demo, and generally you should, I always like to take the demo team off their script. Right, everybody comes in, they've got their demo script, they've got their happy path. The best ones, and having been on both sides of this equation, I'll also respect it if I'm in a buying situation. I don't want to hear your canned demo. I want to ask my questions. If I'm in a selling situation, I would always respect it when a customer told me, here's what I'm interested in. Here's what I want to see. And I've had really good processes, which they would tell me, hey, you're going to come in and do a demo. And these are the 20 use cases that I want to see. I don't care what your, demo environment does. But I'd also like to throw them curveballs from time to time, just to test. All right, how robust is this environment? Are you just giving me all the kind of pre-canned happy
Mhm.
path type of stuff?
Yeah.
Um, but then, the most important thing that I would always, if I was making a large scale decision along the lines, Steve, of what you described,
Mhm.
I always did either a POC or even a small scale pilot with very rigorous performance targets. Now, look, that makes things harder for the vendors, right? They really don't want to do it. The flip side is if they really believe in what they're doing, they should be willing to sign up for it. Again, especially for a big purchase. It's also going to tell you a lot about how hard or easy it's going to be to deploy that solution, right? Like
Yeah.
if you can't get a POC stood up rather quickly, what do you
Mhm.
think that enterprise-wide deployment is going to look like? If you can't get them to agree to do a POC or a pilot before going live, how confident are they in their ability to drive real measurable results? So, you're not going to do it for smaller things, but any kind of like big ticket item, never bought anything without at least a live POC in
Mhm.
my environment.
So many good tips. I feel like you need to write a book.
Mhm.
Is that on the horizon? Please tell me it is. No,
Mhm.
I say it kind of laughing, but it's true. I think when you go through, you sort of grow up in human resources, you're not ever taught how to buy technology. You have to do a lot of
Yeah,
learning on your own. And so a lot of these tips you're giving are, it's not just common sense. These are things you have to learn through experience. And I love the idea though of bringing, that the chief technology officer, chief, information officer in early, because I think in HR sometimes we're a little nervous about what we don't understand. Like we might be exposed that we don't understand it all, but really that's your chance to be a learner yourself, right? And people are more bought in when you're doing it together to begin with.
yeah,
So I think,
for sure. Well,
it's
I
hard
mean,
to
the
do.
SaaS revolution really transformed the enterprise technology buying process,
Oh yeah.
right? It went from being everything was on lockdown to kind of the wild, wild west. So one of the things that we did was we created this, whatever you want to call it. We called the Software Advisory Council. But effectively, what we did is we paired and partnered. Usually, it was like maybe one or two functional leaders, like in the HR domain, it'd be like your HR tech leader who worked. Oftentimes, would be someone in the HR function with somebody in the CIO office, like a two in the
Mhm.
box model.
Yeah.
And their job was not just on the evaluation side, but to be proactive,
Mm.
right? So that we're not kind of, because if you're not proactive, I mean, you think about it, nobody imagines themselves in this box, but you're basically getting pulled around by the vendors. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but they're pulling you in certain directions as
Mhm.
opposed to you going through, okay, proactively, here's what we think we need to do. Here's what our organization is going to look like in the future. Let's put together a proactive roadmap of all the technologies we think we need, and then proactively start going out there and evaluating them. And so to that point, if I'm going to a show like an HR Tech, I will have already, got my, my long-term vision of where I want to be from a human capital management perspective, key opportunities and gaps I need to suss out. Here's my short list of domain areas, vendors I want to go look at, and then let me take my HR subject matter domain expert and the person I've paired them up with in the CIO office, and let's go. And we're proactively defining our technology roadmap versus just reacting to all the vendor pull that's out there.
That's
As an
Yeah,
such good
example.
advice.
yeah, that's outstanding advice and really great advice and timely advice as we approach this fall season where there's lots of market information coming, there's lots of conferences, virtual and in-person conferences all around the world, honestly, in the HR tech domain. And so for organizations to really, and they're thinking about also, right, like heading into the fall, planning on budgets for 2025, if companies are doing a calendar-based budget, depending on your
Yeah.
fiscal year, things like that, right? It's a great time to approach this very strategically. And as you said, Don, you lead the conversation rather than being led around, right, by the next fancy tool. Don, one of the things we wanted to talk with you about, and just since we said it at the beginning, you're able to pick and choose your areas where you
Yeah.
want to work in, you want to spend your time in, what's interesting to you, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there's a couple of either just types of technology or specific solutions,
Yeah.
either one, that you are really intrigued by and you may be working with now. That's fine. Just tell us like, boy, this is really interesting and exciting. And let me tell you why, because from your experience and perspective,
Yeah.
it matters more, I think, than from
Yeah.
most. So I'd love for you to maybe share a couple of really tidbits for our audience that things to look out for.
Yeah, no, appreciate the opportunity. And the area that I've been most excited and passionate about since moving into the new space that I'm in, it's really all around employee-centric solutions. And just I'll put the broad category of employee health and wellness and welfare together. And and it was an area we were pushing down that path when I was at ADP. We just got more and more interested in understanding who is the ultimate customer, who is the ultimate user of the solution. And from an altruistic perspective, how can we help make their lives better? And by the way, I certainly have a newfound passion for it, as I've got two kids now who are in the workforce, and I see their trials and tribulations, and I know how challenging it can be out there. I really experience the workforce through their eyes, the true Gen Zers in the workplace. And so
Nice.
a few areas I'm excited about. One is I talked a little bit about financial wellness. It's popular now given some of the challenging economic landscape that we see out there. But look, we've been through challenging periods in the past. That's not new. I think what's new is employees' willingness to take the help from their employers. I think previous generations, certainly my generation, might have had more privacy and other concerns to want to keep that in arm's length. But the generation in the workplace right now is much more open to having that conversation. Could be with technology vendor, could be via their employer route. So I think the flip side of that is it's almost like there's too many solutions coming at the individual employee, and so they have a hard time figuring out how to make use of what's offered. So I mentioned we were pushing down this path when I was at ADP. We had launched our Wisely platform for people to get paid, and then use that as a vehicle to start to layer in these additional solutions. So capturing people at the point of pay, maybe showing them things that they're interested in, like maybe it's early pay, earned wage access, savings, incentives, and rewards, and then using that as a way to start them down the path of financial wellness. So, one of the companies I've seen out there that's doing this, kind of new, exciting, is a company called Paid, PAID. It's at hellopaid.com. And I think what's key about that is rather than being a point solution provider, they're trying to look at it holistically. but also, because here, hey, here are your discounts, here's your earned wage access, here's your other rewards. Let me take a look at this holistically, but then try and capture people at the point of pay so you can sort of get their attention, which is something that obviously ADP had pursued, I think, quite effectively. And then another example of that, now I'm going to talk about in the health space, and in particular with ancillary benefits. So what's interesting to me is the sheer number and nature of employee benefits and categories. It's just exploded, right? It
Yeah.
used to be, hey, health, dental, vision, maybe a little life insurance.
Yeah.
Now we've got pet insurance, long-term care insurance, hospital indemnity, legal indemnity. The list is endless. And yet, if you ask,
Identity theft is another category.
identity
right?
theft,
Yeah.
I saw a statistic. There are 88 categories, not companies, categories of employer-sponsored benefits. And yet, if you ask the average employee if they're satisfied with their benefits or even they understand their options, most of them will say no, they're confused. And it's a shame when you think about how much companies invest here, right? So the data point I have is US companies are going to spend about $3.3 trillion on employee benefits this year.
Wow.
Trillion with a T. And by the way, that amount is growing twice as fast as cash-based compensation because there's some tax-based benefits to paying benefits as opposed to salaries, right? So we're paying more and more benefits, and yet as much as we're paying more benefits out, employees are more confused and less satisfied. And so here again, we need a way to cut through the noise, help them understand it, but do so in a manner that's more employee-centric as opposed to vendor solution centric, because every vendor is pushing their ideas, right? Well, hey, we've got an HSA account, we've got a 401, and apropos of nothing else, in the abstract they may make sense, but everybody's got different needs, different circumstances, different preferences. So one of the innovative companies that's really way out front here is called Naya with 2 Y's, and they've built an intelligence layer that sits on top of all these offerings and takes into consideration the individual. And now we're leveraging AI, which we can, to personalize recommendations based on each individual's unique needs and preferences, right? So, should I top up my 401k account? Should I put more money into my HSA? Should I pay down my student loan debt? It's going to vary. You just can't look at these things in the abstract. And so it's just a really better way to help employees make decisions about their benefits and use them throughout the year. Like I was given the personal story. So my oldest daughter, she just turned 26, right? So congratulations, you came off of my health plan. I told her you're now officially an adult, right? You've got your own health plan, you're paying your bills, you're making your own appointments.
Wow.
Like I can't even make it. Wow, you're an adult now. But so when she turns 26 and she's got a really, she works for a good company. They have good benefits, but she's never, she's always been, part of my plan. So they sent her a 40-page PDF. Here you go. Have a read and, open enrollment, pick what you want. She just takes one look at it. And of course, Dad, what do I do? And okay, I think I'm in a position where I can give her good advice. So like she's young, she's healthy, she's 26. I said, you should be in the high deductible plan with an HSA, right? And again, based on her specific circumstances, but pattern that's going to be for most people. And she said, but all my friends are signing up for this plan with the FSA account. Oh no, I could help them so much. It's so that's what basically Naya is. It's your personal benefits co-pilot out there. And and another great factoid I saw is in health plan. Now I'll use the family number for an individual. It's going to be lower, but I think a family plan costs about roughly $20,000 a year, and then the employee share is going to be typically 30%, so $6,000.
Yeah.
The average person will be spent more time picking out which color TV to buy, which flat screen, than on their health insurance. And you overwhelm them with information. They get confused, they tune out, they take the default option. and they need help, and that's what
Yeah,
NIDA, they're
and
having
that's a really
amazing
great
success.
point, Don. And there's been some innovation there, and there's been some advancements there, but it's been a little bit narrow and not taken the bigger picture
Right.
into account. Like there are some tools, we've seen them, right, that help an employee. Well, how many times do you think you're going to go to the doctor? Oh, 7 times.
Yeah.
What prescriptions are you taking? You know, and it'll help them
Yep.
direct them a little bit, but it doesn't kind of take into
Right.
account the
But you
other
need to look at,
elements, other aspects in their
right.
life, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, take an example, like funding an HSA account. In the abstract, sounds like a great idea, right? Okay, but do you have student loan debt? Do you have
Yeah.
credit card debt? Where are you on all that stuff? Maybe it's not a great idea. And that's the problem with all these other tools that are just kind of very sort of narrow in their scope. And I think that's where NIA really differentiates itself by being, the most holistic out
Yeah,
there.
that's
But
neat.
could I throw one more at you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please, yes.
So there's a company I've been working with that I really love as well, called Summer, and they're in the student loan benefit space. And so we'll start with the factoid. Total student loan debt outstanding right now is $1.7 trillion. Total student, you got mortgage, credit card, student loan. I think is the number 3 category of debt. It's a real problem, and I know a lot of young people who are struggling with it. People, I had a conversation with a friend recently, and their kids are like, well, they want to get married, but they can't afford to move out of the basement because they've got their, it's true story. It's
Yeah.
it's sad. So what I love about Summer and what they do is they help individuals navigate the student loan space, but they really started out from the perspective of forgiveness, because there are all these government programs out there. You read about it in, oh, the government is going to forgive another $500 billion of student loan debt. Sounds great. That's the headline, but there's actual process and steps that you have
Right.
to go through to qualify. So they'll announce the 500 billion. The
Mhm.
reality in terms of how many people actually tap into that, much smaller. And so they help people navigate that space. And to date, they've helped the employees save over $1.7 billion by
Wow.
helping them tap into different programs like public service loan forgiveness or income driven repayment plans. But what I really like about this more than anything else, I've told them, like, this is the most powerful thing I've ever seen in all my years. We talked about the 88 categories of benefits out there and all these wellness, and like there's a ton of them. They guarantee a hard dollar ROI, right?
Wow.
Guarantee. They'll come in and say, for every dollar you spend with them, they will guarantee that they will save your employees at least 3.
Wow.
And the reality is actually, they're setting the guarantee floor at 3. The reality is typically much higher, especially in certain industries like public sector or healthcare or nonprofit, because of that public service loan forgiveness plan. So it's not about student loan debt payment plans, which they can do those too, or a
Right.
lot of companies are doing it. But how about, instead of doing like debt payment plans, we just get the debt taken off the books?
Yeah.
And again, what I love about it is there's so many vendors out there. There's so many new emerging categories of benefits. And me as a buyer, if I was in an HR department, I want to continue to do robust things. How many of them come to you with a hard dollar 3-for-1 ROI commitment? It's like, I think they're the only one that I've ever seen. So, I like that. I like
Yeah.
knowing that, I'm going to get something for what I'm investing in this thing. But so those are, a few of the interesting companies I've been working with. But what they all have in common, and the theme that I like, and what interests me now at this point in my life, is how can we use technology, including, breakthroughs like generative AI, through the employer channel to help individuals make better choices, better decisions, and have better outcomes around their health, their financial wellness, or their personal welfare. And just, that's what's exciting to me at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah, thank you
love
for
it.
sharing those, because I think that when you kind of alluded to, you know, in our generation, it was just something we didn't talk about, but we also didn't necessarily have a parent maybe who knew how to
Yeah.
teach us about how to make these choices. I mean, I think I have very good parents when it comes to this,
Yeah.
but I still don't think they advised me because they didn't know, right? So
Yeah.
it makes it very hard for the people like us who are in these highest leadership positions now to understand this need. But
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Thank you for sharing about your own children too, because I think, you know, we all have children in that early 20s age. My niece is now living with me. She's a senior in college, and she just came home yesterday and said she's taking a financial management class, and she thought it was going to be a little boring. It's a very highly personalized experience that the professors at the University of Nebraska are giving their students. And so what I'm thinking is, wow, she's already being taught that this is what I need to focus on. And so worker or employers beware, like these students are going to graduate and be like, this is what I expect then. I expect these kinds
Yeah.
of benefits. I expect this kind of
Interesting.
technology and assistance to help me make these choices. So again, if I'm the buyer and I'm thinking like, I don't know if I really need this, I think we do, because look at what's showing up on TikTok. What are the Gen Z population sort of complaining about? What they don't have, what they don't understand. It's this
Yeah.
very thing. It's financial, it's benefits, it's pay, right? And they're kind of posting is more of complaints, but take note, that's where you need to spend some of your tech money on, right? So I love
Absolutely.
your examples.
Yeah, these are great
Those are.
examples, Don. And I think also like the through line to employee well-being, employee welfare, and right, you didn't mention this, but the not stated part of this for organizations is, hey, I want to drive retention, I want to drive engagement, I want to drive loyalty, right? We're not going to do a whole show now at the end of the show about labor markets and it's tough to find talent and things like that, which it still is for the most part in most sectors of the economy. But so I think, you know, giving folks access to tools, resources, direct support, right? Helping them get student loans
Yeah.
forgiven, you know, is if you're the employer helping to facilitate that, you know, that really entrenches you, right? In terms of
That's right.
how the employees think about you.
That's right. Like one of the companies that Summer is working with is it's a roll up. It has a lot of private veterinary clinics. So it's like a number of them, a chain. Well, you know, people coming out of vet school, guess what? They
Oh
got a
yeah.
lot of student loan debt. So they
Right.
put it right there into the, you know, they go on campus and they're like leading with that. Like, hey, here's, you know, we're a great place to work and we have great, you know, great
See?
compensation and great benefits. And we're going to help you get those student loans forgiven or paid off or whatever combination
Yeah.
thereof. I mean, they're leading with it in their messaging. So it's very powerful to your point about an employee retention and
Yeah.
attraction benefit.
Attraction. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they're
Right.
just more educated, I think, than our generation, because we were that generation where you didn't talk and you just didn't really even ask, right? I wasn't going to go to my boss and be like, I need pet insurance, you know, or something like that. I just didn't even know. So I do think too, I mean, it's a big generalization, but it's a little bit true. I mean, Gen Z, we're a little bit like, oh, you know, we didn't have all these fancy things. We didn't need this. We made it just fine. Kind of put down that attitude a little bit and think, you know what, just
That's right.
because we didn't have that experience doesn't mean that we can't use tech and provide it for the employees
No.
that are entering the
And
workforce so that they can have a more educated experience throughout their entire career with you.
right. And if you're keep your focus, if you're Gen X especially, keep your focus on fighting with the young people about the Oasis reunion tour. Fight about that. Don't fight about this. I think
Yeah.
that's my
Oh my
advice.
gosh.
Don, this
No,
has been awesome. Great to catch up with you. Favorite guest of the show. Really great perspective on what's happening in the market. Some advice for HR leaders when they approach technology and how to sort of make the best decisions around it when there's so much of it being thrown at you. And then sharing some of what you're up to now with some of these great innovative companies focusing on employee welfare, employee well-being, financial wellness. Great stuff, Don. We covered a ton. I'll just throw it to you. Just any last words? We'll see you out at HR Tech, I know, but anything else you want to share before we let you go?
Oh yeah. I'll see you out at HR Tech, and let me know when the guest host slot opens up.
Well, you know what? So I was just thinking, obviously we're live, but I think it's a good idea. I think it would be fun to have you on at least once a quarter and talk about 2 or 3 or 4 different companies that we should all be paying attention to.
Maybe so,
You know, you've
yeah.
got your finger on the pulse. Again, I'm looking at it truly as with a practitioner hat on. I found I'm making notes of like, wow, if I was sitting in that seat where I'm making decisions and trying to be influential or persuasive in my organization, you had some really solid tips too. So I don't know.
Awesome.
Love you to come back more often, and
Yeah,
even
we'll
if
do
it's
that.
just to give a company or 2 that we should all be looking at.
Yeah, awesome.
I would love that.
Thanks,
All right,
Don.
we'll see you next month.
Yeah, we will
All
put some
right.
links in the show notes to some of the companies Don mentioned as well. And
Yes.
thanks so much to Don. Trish, thank you. Thanks to our friends at Paychex, of course. I didn't talk too much
That's
about
right.
Paychex, Don, but they are supporting us as always, and they're wonderful people there. And I do have something to say about them, which I'll say in the intro. But Trish, thank you. Great to see you. And let's enjoy your Summer Friday coming up in a couple days.
I know. I'm so excited. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody, to the HR Happy Hour show. Catch all the show archives. The Outwork in America show. I said the wrong name, Trish. This is the Outwork in America show. We've got so many shows. I don't even know which one I'm doing anymore.
We have like 9 shows. It's great.
Catch all the archives at hrhappyhour.net. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. And bye for now.